Your news, bro. You and GSP had a training session in the Bellator cage. That's news. How did that happen?
Is it? All right. Well, let's see. I was at Bellator.
Is it? Of course it is.
All right. Then we had a training session. All right. Well, I'll tell you the story. I don't know if it's news or not, but let's get it out. So, I was at Bellator. It was in San Jose. Chandler versus Henderson, which turned into an amazing fight. Did you watch it?
I did not, because Bellator is on tape delay somehow.
Yes, and live on the East Coast and tape delayed on the West. That has to be changed with Spike. Sports they have to be live. It's as simple as that. But so at any rate, I'm out there in San Jose, and George was coming out for Francis Carmont. His longtime teammate was on the card, and I just sent him a text message. Hey, you want to work out in the cage? And he said, yeah. So I grabbed Neil. Big Neil was out there. He had a few guys, but Chandler was one of them, Neil Melanson. And I just said, hey, George is here. We're going to do a workout. Can you run it? He said, yeah. And he's a catch wrestler. He's a master grappler, but he's a catch wrestler. And that's what Josh Barnett has made famous. But it is significantly different from jiu-jitsu, and it's significantly different from wrestling. It is its own sport. And George hadn't been exposed to it.
At all?
No. George, his grappling is jiu-jitsu, purely jiu-jitsu. And, under Danaher, under Renzo Gracie. Jiu-jitsu, though. So George was really enamored by it. He was blown away, and the positions are different. It's a lot more brutal, quite frankly. And George loved it. He was eating it up, which was a kick. And so Neil started opening up a little more. You get those great guys, and there's not a lot of great catch wrestlers. Neil Melanson, Josh Barnett, they're the top of the food chain for the entire country for this catch wrestling, trained directly by Billy Robinson before he passed. So pretty rare skill set. Those guys don't like to open up any more than anybody else. You got to be in the club. You got to be one of their boys, and they know they can trust you. Well, George was so respectful and making it very clear to Coach Melanson that, hey, this is awesome, and I've never seen it. And so Neil did. I watched him. I watched as the workout went, where Neil started finally opening up more and going, okay, then you go here, then you go here. And George loved it.
Now, you picked up something in drilling wrestling with George that we both thought was interesting. Speak on that.
Yeah, well, okay, so
please do the George voice.
I don't know if I can do it.
You do it pretty good.
Sometimes I try the George voice, and then it ends up like more Irish. Okay, that wasn't bad right there. Actually, there was something there. Okay, well, here's the thing. So it was going to be all grappling workout because we had no mouthpieces and gloves, and we just had shorts, T-shirts. So, okay, grappling workout. So I grab him, we kind of bend over like a wrestling stance. I hit a couple of moves, and George goes, what's the point of doing this? Let's get into our takedowns.
It's just so much better when you tell it in George's.
What is the point of doing it like this? Let's get into the takedowns through our striking. So I say, okay, cool. So he shows me what he means, and we stand in the open. We got, again, no gloves. We're bare knuckled. We're just in shorts and T-shirts. And he starts throwing punches and kicks at me, and then boom, changes elevation and gets to his shot that way. And, he was throwing fast, and he hit me on the chin a couple of times. Now, he'd stop the second he would touch it, but it would come at me, 90 miles an hour, and then he'd stop it, but it was a very risky game he was playing. He never went too hard, but he was throwing heat. And very controlled and really interesting when he stood in front of me and moved before he got into his shot. And he's very big that you don't go from striking to shooting. You don't go from striking to wrestling and then hope it works. He's very big into the fact that you hide it all as one motion. So your opponent, me, can't tell when he's striking versus wrestling versus kicking versus punching versus knee. You can't tell that it all just blends together as a mirage. And he is very good at that. And then when it was my turn, he would correct me and he would go, I could see that coming. I could see it. Even if I would get in, he'd go, yeah, you got me, but I saw it coming. Hide it this way, hide it that way. So that's why those workouts are so good. If you can leave with one thing, if I could pass one thing to him, he could pass one thing to me, it's worth it. Now, Neil passed 2 or 3 things.
Now, did you get a chance to do that yesterday?
Yes, I did it with Tyree. I will do it every day. George said he only does it for 5 minutes. He says he does whatever the coach wants for his workout. When practice is over, he does 1 round of that, and he just does it every day. So, that's one thing that I left with. But he was very big. He did make a comment. He said that he's at 195. About the heaviest he's ever been, that he usually was hanging at about 182 to 184, fighting at 170, but that he did think there was some legs to the him versus Bisping matchup. And Bisping was on board. Bisping was on board and George was on board. And I didn't get the story. I mean, we've read stuff publicly that he's having some troubles with negotiations or whatever's happening there with his contract or what's his a sponsorship and the Reebok, whatever it was. And so I think he took for granted that maybe I knew, but he and Bisping were on board. That much I can confirm. And George got his size up thinking he was going to go to 185.
Now, you were saying that George thinks he's in his prime right now. And the guy has been working out. He hadn't stopped working out. In 3 years, he hadn't stopped working out. Now, you went with him when he was still fighting.
Sure.
When you were at the top of the division. You went with him this weekend, even though it wasn't, you guys weren't sparring, but you were going. What do you think?
Okay. Well, here, let me answer it like this. The only times I've worked out with George, we've done drilling, some striking drills, but the only time we've gone hard, set the clock and try to beat one another, is pure jiu-jitsu, pure grappling. And the first time I went with him, it was fine. It was fine, but he definitely won. He definitely, he won, right? Well, in that time, all I've done is jiu-jitsu. I had never done jiu-jitsu before, just MMA, and there's some submissions involved. I've spent 2 years in a purely jiu-jitsu gym doing jiu-jitsu and even entering competitions. So in that realm that we're practicing in, I've gotten much better. He still won this time. It was much closer. He still won. He got some positions. Phil Davis watched the workout, and he came up to me and said, he goes, "Hey, you guys were going pretty hard. How's George feel?" And I just said, "Phil," I said, I'm embarrassed to say this because I do have size on. I have a meaningful size. I have 20 pounds on George. I said, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but there's nothing you can do when he gets in certain spots. He feels like 1,000 pounds. He is the strongest. He literally is the second strongest man I've ever gone with next to Les Gutches. But that's man in general. Weighs 195 pounds. I've gone with 300 pounders. I'm talking about strongest man, not strongest man pound for pound. Strongest man. He's number 2 in my life. And there is some positions he gets in that you're going to be stuck. And Phil goes, that's what it looked like. And he said, if you ever work out with him again, I want in on it. I said, Phil, I would love for you to get in on it because it is a unique feel that George brings. So this workout was a lot closer than the first one. And, I had some things that now I knew how to try and go for, and I had some success, but, he's got some spots where he is superhuman. The greats, Joel, all have something. John Jones with that crazy reach advantage. Chael Sanderson in wrestling, again, with that wingspan where he could be on your neck and be on your ankle at the same time. Mike Tyson, other way, more compact, but god damn was he powerful with it. Muhammad Ali had that speed, had that reach. All the greats have something different. And with St. Pierre, you wouldn't know it to look at him. You got to feel him, but it's strength.
Fedor, one of your favorites, is now a stablemate of yours with Bellator.
Yeah, Fedor's a nerd. And, I saw the nerd at the show, and I never got over to him. Had I got over to him, I would have simply shook his hand and welcomed him, because we're in America, right? I don't want him coming over here where he barely speaks the language and getting bullied by anybody, including me. And Mitrione was very respectful of that, too. Mitrione's got to fight him. And Mitrione just shook his hand and said, "Hey, man, welcome to the family." And it was as simple as that. But that's the way you handle it when a guy comes over to your country, and he comes alone. Right, he doesn't bring his team and his entourage. He shows up in a sweat. It's like, where's Waldo? Oh, Waldo's right there. He's calling himself Fedor today. That's the deal with Fedor. But, yeah, man, he comes out looking like a dork with nothing to say. There's no interest there. He's got a terrible North American record. I hope he can sell and draw. I know they invested big in him. I know I care about Fedor. I give him a hard time to you because I like to look at reality. I think the reality of his career is that it's very fugazi. The things that went on in Japan are extremely questionable as to whether they were real or not. But I will say this, Joel. Even with that said, I want to see him fight. I am a hardcore fan, and he is a legend.
Based on his last...
If for better or worse, though, he does qualify as a legend. He's an old-timer, and it's awesome. I like that.
Based on his last performance, Mitrione isn't the guy he needs to be fighting, I can tell you that.
Well, who else would you put him with? Mitrione is one of the bigger names and faces in that, probably the biggest,
most recognizable. The dude that Lashley just fought?
Okay,
some
do you
jobber.
have a name? Okay, well, you got to have a name. See,
Jobber
that's the problem.
McJobber.
So Mitch Rion is the biggest name. So if you're bringing Fedor in and you're paying him, what they're paying him, big money, big money. One of two things has to happen. He's either got to beat somebody good so you can run with that, or he's got to lose to somebody good and then you can run with Mitch Rion. But you have to go one way or the other. So I think the Mitch Rion makes sense. And, Fedor does swing wide and Mitch Rion does come straight down the middle. I think that it does look pretty good for Mitch Rion, but at the end of the day, it's Fedor. Can he get over it? I'm telling you, look, I think Fedor's record is very questionable, but it's still Fedor. You got to respect him, and Mitch Rion, I have to assume, respects him. When we're doing this, bro, if you're looking at a TV screen at some goddamn football game, that's why we interrupt each other constantly.